The man who stepped into the courtroom wore his years like a second skin. His hands were cuffed in front of him, his back hunched, and a threadbare coat swallowed his frail frame. "Name?" asked the clerk. His voice, fragile but steady, replied, "Samuel Hayes, Master Sergeant, United States Army." No one in the courtroom stirred until the judge glanced at his case file. Something about the name caught her breath. Her eyes locked onto the record, and in a moment that passed like thunder behind silence, her face paled. That name, Samuel Hayes, belonged to the man who once saved her husband during the siege of Bakba. The same man thought to have been killed in action 2 decades earlier. Samuel sat down slowly, his stiff joints barely obeying him. His coat hung loose, 2 sizes too big, faded with age and memory. His shoes were worn at the soles. Nothing about him spoke of heroism, yet once he'd worn medals on a clean uniform and stood tall among giants. The bailiff called the case. Docket number 56C, City versus Samuel Hayes. Charges: vagrancy, unlawful entry, resisting arrest. Samuel's steps forward were slow, measured. Pain etched every movement. Old injuries from both Iraq and Afghanistan, ones that never healed. His silence had been his only companion through those long, invisible wounds. The prosecutor, a crisp young man with a haircut too sharp to be kind, spoke confidently. "Mr. Hayes has repeatedly violated city ordinances by loitering behind Magnolia Market on 5th. The owner has filed multiple complaints in recent weeks." No one mentioned the real story, that Samuel had been huddling beside the exhaust vents behind the market, using the warmth of the kitchen fans to survive winter nights. He had never asked for money, never disturbed anyone. He just sat there, quiet, invisible, and cold. Officer Carmen Lewis took the stand. "We found the defendant behind the market around midnight. He refused to leave when instructed." He hadn't refused. He had asked, begged for just a few more minutes. The young man working late had handed him half a sandwich, and Samuel had simply wanted to finish it before facing the bitter night again. But there was no explaining that to police in the dark. "This is his 3rd citation this winter," the prosecutor continued. "We recommend 30 days community service and a restraining order barring him from all downtown businesses." The words sounded like a death sentence. That order would cut him off from the shelter on 8th Street, his only place of rest. It would mean no more meals at the Friday soup kitchen, no warm bed, no sanctuary. The judge looked over the top of her glasses. "Mr. Hayes, do you have legal representation?" Samuel shook his head. "My public defender got called away to another hearing." "Would you like to speak on your own behalf?" He swallowed hard. "Not much to say, Your Honor. Just needed somewhere warm." The judge's eyes searched his face. "Why that location?" He hesitated. "The kid who works there, Marcus. He sometimes gives me food. His mom worked with me, back when I was stationed at Fort Hood." "You served?" "Yes, ma'am. Army, 1983 to 2006. Master Sergeant, 3rd Infantry Division." She made a note, though military service typically had no place in municipal court. Still, her fingers trembled slightly. She continued reading the file, flipping pages until she stopped abruptly. Something in his record froze her heart. Before she could speak again, the courtroom doors opened. A man in an expensive coat stepped forward. "Your Honor, Daniel Morgan for the defense. I apologize for the intrusion. Mr. Hayes is now my client." Samuel blinked in confusion. He didn't know this man, didn't hire him, couldn't afford to hire anyone. Judge Evelyn Hart raised an eyebrow. The court was not informed of this change. "It's a very recent development," Morgan replied smoothly. "I'd like a short recess to confer with my client." She looked at him, then at Samuel, her lips pressed in a line. 15 minutes. Samuel turned toward the lawyer as the courtroom cleared. "I don't have a cent to pay you." "You won't need to," Morgan said. "Our firm is handling this free of charge." Samuel frowned. "Why?" Morgan lowered his voice. "Hart, Morgan, and Delaney. Hart, like the judge. They're family." In her chambers, Judge Hart stood by the window, her hands shaking. 20 years on the bench, and nothing had shaken her like this. She opened a drawer and pulled out a faded photo. Her husband, Lieutenant David Hart, grinning beside her at his commissioning ceremony. Behind them stood a tall man in fatigues. His name had been on David's lips in every letter from the war. Hayes. Sergeant Hayes, the man who'd saved him in that hellish firefight on the outskirts of Bacoba. She hadn't seen him since. After David's death, she had tried to find Hayes to thank him, to hear about her husband's final days, but the military had said he'd been deployed again. Then he disappeared, discharged, suffering from trauma and injury, swallowed by a system that forgot its own. And now, impossibly, he was here, in her courtroom, unrecognizable and alone. A knock. Daniel entered. "Evelyn, is it him?" She nodded. David's letters described him perfectly. I even remember his voice. "It's him." Daniel's face darkened. "He doesn't know who you are?" "I doubt it. I changed my name after law school." "What are you gonna do?" "I'm not recusing myself," she said. "Not this time." Back in the courtroom, the judge's face was composed, unreadable. "Mr. Morgan, has your client made a decision?" "We request all charges be dropped," he said. "He wasn't trespassing maliciously. He was surviving." The prosecutor began to object, but Judge Hart raised a hand. "Mr. Hayes," she said gently, "you served in Bacoba in 2004? "Yes, Your Honor." "And on March 12th of that year, were you involved in an ambush evacuation?" A long pause. Samuel's eyes lost focus. "Yes. Convoy got hit. We were pinned. One of our officers went down. Tried to drag a medic out of fire. I went after him." "And his name?" "Lieutenant Hart. Young, brave. Wouldn't stop telling me to save the others before him." In the gallery, an older man in a veteran's jacket stood abruptly. "That's him. That's Sergeant Hayes. I was there that day." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge's gavel struck once. "Order." She turned to Samuel. "That officer was my husband." Samuel's face registered shock, but the judge continued. "You gave me 2 more weeks with him. He wrote home, told us you were the bravest man he'd ever known." Silence blanketed the room. "This court will recess for 10 minutes. When she returned, 3 uniformed officers followed her, one carrying a velvet box. "Mr. Hayes," Judge Hart began, "the Department of Defense has reopened files under the Forgotten Warriors Initiative. Your case was among them." The colonel stepped forward. "By order of the Secretary of the Army, and in recognition of extraordinary valor, the Distinguished Service Cross is awarded to Master Sergeant Samuel J. Hayes." Gasps. Applause. The courtroom stood, one by one. Even the prosecutor rose in silence. The charges against Hayes were dismissed. "With prejudice," Judge Hart said, wiping a tear from her cheek. After the crowd thinned, a man stepped forward. Marcus, the market worker. "My mom always said a soldier saved her friend's life in Iraq. If I ever met a Sergeant Hayes, I was to thank him." A day later, VA representatives met with Samuel. "Your disability is now recognized at 100%. You'll receive full benefits, housing, medical care, and compensation for the years missed." 2 weeks after that, Samuel stood inside a modest apartment provided by the Veterans Restoration Program. On the wall hung his medals, newly restored and framed, including the one he'd thought lost forever. A knock at the door. It was Judge Hart, out of robes, carrying a bundle of letters. "They're from David," she said. "He wrote about you often." They sat together, and Samuel read, "Mom and Evie, tell everyone I'm safe. Sergeant Hayes saved my ass again. He doesn't know what he means to us." Tears welled in the judge's eyes. "He looked up to you, Sam. After he died, I dedicated everything to veterans like you." Samuel looked down. "I just did my duty." She shook her head. "You showed us what duty means." Outside, snow began to fall softly over the city. Inside, 2 people sat in quiet understanding, united by sacrifice, remembrance, and the healing power of being seen. "I thought I was forgotten," Samuel said. "You were never forgotten," she replied. "We just had to find you again."